You don't get a choice. Drain it, or I'll make your life miserable.
Carol Henderson thought she had all the power. President of the Riverside Oaks HOA for 6 years, she'd bullied dozens of homeowners into submission with her fake authority and manufactured rules. What she didn't know was that my smelly pond she was so desperate to drain wasn't just a hobby. It was a federally licensed commercial fish hatchery worth $3 million. And the moment she opened those floodgates without permission, she committed felony destruction of protected aquatic resources. I'm a wildlife conservation officer with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I was about to make this the most expensive mistake of her life. Let me back up. My name is Derek Matthews. After 22 years working in fisheries management and law enforcement for fish and wildlife, I'd finally saved enough to buy my dream property. 11 acres backing onto a natural creek in Riverside Oaks, a planned community outside Portland. The property came with existing agricultural zoning and a grandfather clause that exempted it from most HOA restrictions. Perfect for what I had planned. I'd spent 2 years and nearly $400,000 building a state-of-the-art trout hatchery. We're talking temperature-controlled ponds, filtration systems, oxygenation equipment, the works. I had federal permits, state licenses, and contracts with 5 restaurants and 2 sporting goods chains. 50,000 rainbow and steelhead trout at various growth stages. This wasn't a backyard koi pond. This was my retirement business. The property was beautiful. My wife Sarah and I had just moved into the main house with our 2 kids. The ponds were set back from the road, surrounded by natural vegetation to maintain water temperature. Everything was legal, permitted, and frankly, none of the HOA's business. That's when I met Carol. She showed up 3 days after we moved in, clipboard in hand, wearing her HOA polo shirt like it was a police uniform. She didn't knock. She just walked around the side of my house toward the pond area. "Excuse me," I called out. "Can I help you?" She barely glanced at me. "I'm Carol Henderson, HOA president. I'm conducting a property inspection. We've had complaints about a smell coming from your property." I walked over calmly. "Mrs. Henderson, this is a licensed commercial fish hatchery. You'll need to schedule inspections through proper channels, not just walk onto private property." She finally looked up, and I saw that expression I'd seen 1,000 times in my career. Pure entitlement. The HOA bylaws give me authority to inspect any property for violations. And I'm telling you right now, whatever this is, she gestured dismissively at my ponds. It violates our community standards. Commercial operations aren't allowed. I kept my voice level. "Actually, this property has agricultural zoning that predates the HOA. I have documentation if you'd like to see it. I don't care about your paperwork. This needs to go. You have 30 days. That's when I knew exactly who I was dealing with. The letter arrived via certified mail. Notice of violation, printed in bold red letters. According to Carol, my hatchery violated Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws. No noxious odors or unsightly water features. The fine? $500, increasing to $100 per day until the violation was remedied. I called the HOA office. Carol answered. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to explain something. This facility is federally regulated. I can't just shut it down because of a misinterpreted bylaw. Mr. Matthews, I've been HOA president for 6 years. I know the rules. Either comply or we'll take legal action. I'd like to present my case at the next board meeting." Request denied. The decision is final. I could have pulled out my badge right then. Could have explained that threatening a federal wildlife officer's licensed operation was a very bad idea. But I was curious. How far would she actually go? Carol returned with reinforcements. 3 people in official-looking vests that said HOA compliance. They had cameras and clipboards. "We're documenting the violation for our legal case," Carol announced, not asking permission. "You're on private property," I said evenly. "You need to leave." One of her compliance officers stepped forward. "Ma'am has the authority. We can cite you for obstruction." I looked at his vest more carefully. Bought online, probably. These weren't officials. They were neighbors she'd recruited and costumed. "Document from the road if you want. Step 1 foot past this line, and you're trespassing." Carol's face reddened. "You don't get to threaten us. We have legal authority here." "No, you don't. But I'm giving you a chance to walk away." They left, but Carol turned back. "You just made this much worse for yourself." Sarah found it tucked under our windshield wiper. An official-looking citation printed on fake government letterhead. Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. Notice of violation. It claimed my hatchery was polluting local waterways and ordered immediate cessation of operations. It looked legitimate enough to fool most people. The phone number went to a disconnected line. I recognized it immediately as fraud. Someone had created a fake government document. That's a felony. I made copies and filed them carefully. The evidence was stacking up nicely. Carol organized what she called a community safety meeting at the neighborhood clubhouse. Sarah and I weren't invited, but our neighbor texted us about it. I showed up anyway. Carol was mid-presentation when I walked in. She had a slideshow with photos of my property, claiming the hatchery was destroying property values and creating health hazards. Mr. Matthews has decided to join us, she said with a tight smile. Perhaps you'd like to tell your neighbors when you're planning to remove your illegal operation? I stayed calm. It's not illegal. It's fully licensed and permitted. I'd be happy to share that documentation with anyone interested. Your permits don't override HOA authority, she shot back. An older gentleman raised his hand. Carol, if he has government permits, don't we need to check with a lawyer before pushing this? Carol dismissed him. I've consulted with our legal team. We're within our rights. What legal team? The HOA was barely breaking even according to the public financials. She was bluffing. I'd love to see that legal opinion, I said. It's confidential board business. Of course it was. The deadline in Carol's first letter had arrived. She showed up at 8 a.m. with 2 men in a pickup truck. Since you've refused to comply, we're authorized to take corrective action. I stepped onto my porch. Meaning what exactly? We're shutting off your water access from the community line. That's illegal. You can't cut off someone's utilities. One of the men was already walking toward my water meter. Try it, I said quietly, and I'll have you arrested. Carol laughed. You're going to call the police? For HOA enforcement? They'll laugh at you. I'm not calling the police. Something in my tone made her pause, but her arrogance won out. Look, Mr. Matthews, I don't know what kind of person you think you are, but in this community, I'm the authority. You either follow the rules or face the consequences. We've tried to handle this civilly. Have you? I pulled out my phone and showed her the fake DEQ citation. Creating fraudulent government documents is a federal crime. So is conspiracy to commit fraud. Shall I continue? She barely glanced at it. I don't know what you're talking about. Now move aside, or we'll cite you for obstruction. The man reached for my water meter. Final warning, I said. Carol stepped closer, jabbing her finger at my chest. You don't get to warn me. I have the full authority of this HOA behind me. I have lawyers. I have the board. What do you have? A stinking pond full of fish. That's when I made the call. Hey, Marcus. It's Derek. Yeah, I need you to send a unit to my property. We've got an attempted utility shutoff and possible trespassing. How fast can you get here? Carol rolled her eyes. Calling your friends won't help. Marcus isn't my friend. He's the county sheriff. We work together on poaching cases. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. But she doubled down. I don't care if you're friends with the sheriff. We have legal authority. The 2 men exchanged glances and backed away from the water meter. We're leaving, one of them muttered. You'll stay right there, Carol snapped. But they were already in their truck. A sheriff's deputy arrived 12 minutes later. Carol tried to explain her authority, but the deputy shut it down immediately. Ma'am, you can't authorize utility shutoffs. That's not how HOAs work. Carol left, furious. But I knew she wasn't done. I was at the store when Sarah called, her voice shaking. Derek, you need to come home. Now. I made it back in 15 minutes. What I saw made my blood run cold. My pond had been drained. Completely. 50,000 trout were scattered across the muddy basin, dead and dying. The floodgate had been manually opened, releasing everything into the creek below. Equipment was damaged. Temperature control systems were destroyed. $3 million. Gone. Sarah stood near the house with our kids, both of them crying. Carol's car was parked at the end of my driveway. She was still there, watching from a distance, arms crossed, wearing that same smug expression. She'd crossed the line I couldn't ignore. I walked straight toward her, and she must have seen something in my face because she actually took a step back. You want to know who I really am, Carol? I pulled out my federal credentials. I'm Special Agent Derek Matthews, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. You just destroyed federally protected aquatic resources, committed felony trespass, and caused economic damages in excess of $1 million. And I've been documenting everything. The smug expression vanished. Her mouth opened and closed like one of the fish dying in my pond. I didn't. You never said. You never asked. You just assumed you could bully your way through this. I was already dialing. You're going to want to stand right there while I make some calls. First call, my supervisor at Fish and Wildlife. Second call, Oregon State Police. Third call, the FBI field office, because creating fake federal documents falls under their jurisdiction. Carol tried to leave. You can't keep me here. I'm going home. If you leave this property, you'll be arrested for fleeing the scene of a crime. Your choice. She stayed, her hands shaking, face pale. The first responder was a state trooper I'd worked with on a habitat destruction case 2 years prior. He pulled up, took one look at the devastated pond, and whistled low. Derek, what happened here? I gave him the abbreviated version. Carol tried to interrupt. Officer, he's exaggerating. This is an HOA dispute. He was violating community standards. Ma'am, I'm going to stop you right there, the trooper said. Agent Matthews has federal authority in wildlife matters. If you destroyed his licensed operation, you're looking at serious charges. But I'm the HOA president. I have authority. The trooper shook his head. HOAs don't override federal law. Ever. Within 30 minutes, my property looked like a crime scene. 2 more state troopers. An FBI agent named Rivera who specialized in environmental crimes. My supervisor, Linda Chun, who'd driven up from Salem. And 2 county sheriff's deputies for crowd control, because neighbors had started gathering. Carol stood frozen near her car, watching her world collapse. Agent Rivera examined the drained pond, taking photographs. He picked up one of the dead steelhead trout, a protected species, and turned to Carol. Did you drain this pond? The HOA has rules about water features. He was violating. Yes or no? Did you open this floodgate? She looked around for support and found none. Yes, but I had authorization from the board. Do you have that authorization in writing? Silence. I'll take that as a no. Rivera made notes. Agent Matthews, what's the estimated damage? I've been calculating in my head. 50,000 fish at various growth stages. Replacement cost approximately $400,000. Lost business contracts, another $300,000. Equipment damage, roughly $200,000. We're approaching $1 million in direct damages. Carol went even paler. $1 million? They're just fish. They're federally protected aquatic resources, Linda Chin cut in. Each adult steelhead trout that died here is a separate violation under the Endangered Species Act. We're documenting several hundred. That's when Carol realized she wasn't just facing HOA drama anymore. This was federal. I want my lawyer, she managed. That's smart, Agent Rivera said. You're going to need one. He read her rights. The neighbors watching from the road had their phones out, recording everything. Carol tried one last time. This is insane. I was just enforcing HOA rules. He refused to comply with community standards. I finally spoke up. You created fake federal documents. You trespassed repeatedly. You threatened to shut off utilities. You organized harassment. And then you destroyed a licensed federal operation. At any point, you could have stopped. At any point, you could have actually checked whether you had authority. You didn't because you thought you were untouchable. One of the neighbors shouted from the road. Carol, you told us he was running an illegal operation. Another voice. You said you had lawyers. The crowd was turning. The phone cameras kept recording. A sheriff's deputy approached. Mrs. Henderson, we need you to come with us for questioning. Am I being arrested? Agent Rivera answered. Not yet, but we're opening a federal investigation. Don't leave the county, and you'll need to surrender your passport if you have one. Carol's legs nearly gave out. The deputy helped her to his patrol car. As they drove away, Linda Chin stood next to me, surveying the damage. I'm sorry, Derek. This is catastrophic. Can we rebuild? With insurance and federal assistance? Probably. But it'll take 6 months minimum. She paused. You documented everything? I pulled out my phone and showed her. Date-stamped videos of every interaction. Copies of every fake letter. Recordings of Carol's threats. Photos of the fake compliance officers. You've been building a case this whole time. I told you I wanted to see how far she'd go. Well, she went far enough to spend several years in federal prison. The aftermath moved faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, the FBI had traced the fake DQ letter to a print shop where Carol had placed the order. That added forgery charges. The two men she'd brought to shut off my water were questioned and immediately cooperated, providing statements that Carol had explicitly ordered the pond drainage. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and removed Carol from her position by unanimous vote. Turns out, she'd been acting without board approval for most of her harassment campaign. They formally apologized and offered to cover some of my insurance deductible. 3 weeks later, the charges were filed: destruction of federal property, interference with a federal officer, forgery of government documents, criminal trespass, and about a dozen environmental violations. Combined, Carol was looking at up to 15 years in federal prison and fines exceeding $2 million. Her lawyer tried to negotiate. The prosecutor wasn't interested. I attended the preliminary hearing. Carol looked like she'd aged 10 years. When she saw me, she looked away immediately. The judge reviewed the evidence, including my documentation, and denied bail reduction. "Mrs. Henderson, you deliberately destroyed a federally licensed operation, causing catastrophic damages. You created fraudulent government documents. And the evidence suggests you knew exactly what you were doing because Agent Matthews informed you repeatedly that your actions were illegal. I see no reason to treat this as anything less than what it is: a calculated attack on a federal officer and his lawful business." Carol's trial is set for next spring. Based on the evidence, her lawyer has been pushing for a plea deal. I'll believe it when I see it. As for the hatchery, insurance covered most of the immediate losses. Fish and Wildlife provided grant funding to help rebuild. We'll be operational again by summer, with upgraded security systems and very clear signage explaining exactly whose property this is and what happens to people who trespass. The Riverside Oaks HOA installed a new president, a retired lawyer who actually understands the limits of HOA authority. We've had coffee twice. He apologized profusely. Here's what I learned from all this. Bullies rely on people being too tired, too scared, or too uninformed to fight back. Carol had been terrorizing homeowners for 6 years because nobody had the resources or knowledge to stop her. She thought an HOA vest and a clipboard gave her unlimited power. What she didn't understand is that real authority doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from law, training, and accountability. And when you try to intimidate someone who actually understands how the system works, you don't just lose. You face consequences that change your entire life. Carol learned that lesson the hard way. She thought she was shutting down a smelly pond. What she actually did was commit federal crimes against a federal agent who'd been collecting evidence the entire time. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just letting someone destroy themselves while you document every step. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed seeing justice served when an HOA president finally met her match, make sure to subscribe for more stories where entitled people learn painful lessons about real authority. Have you dealt with an out-of-control HOA or someone who abused their position? Share your stories in the comments below. I read every one.